Hello. Come on in. It's so good to see you. Have a seat. Get comfortable. Can I get you some water or tea or anything? Oh, you're all set. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to have some tea while we talk. So, tell me about how things have been going. You feeling a little better? Good. So things are going well at work and school? Better. Good. What do you think has changed? Mm-hmm. Do you think it's a real change in your workload, or do you think it's a change in your attitude about your workload? Yeah, maybe a little of both. That's pretty common. Everything else is going well. How are things at home? Okay. All right. That's good. Well, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say your anxiety levels have been on average this week? Good. Well, that's better. Definitely. On a scale of 1 to 10, how is your anxiety level today? Lower because you're coming in here. Well, that's good. That's good to hear, because sometimes, your therapy session can be anxiety provoking. So I'm glad to hear that it calms you down. That's great. Well, I had a couple more techniques that I wanted to talk to you about today. Have you been employing some of the other techniques that we talked about? Oh, good. So you've been writing what you would say to a friend? And do you keep a journal? Good. Journal writing is very good for releasing some of your thoughts. I know a lot of anxiety issues is often thought racing, is that we can't stop our brain from working. Does it cause you insomnia? Yeah, that's for a lot of people who have trouble falling asleep. It's because their thoughts are racing and they can't turn them off. And it's often a really good practice just to get up, write down your thoughts, or write down whatever you're obsessing over. I know I've had occasions where I would be talking through an anxiety-provoking phone call I needed to make, or a conversation I needed to have with my boss, or something like that, and I will run it over and over and over in my head. And sometimes I've found it really helpful just to get up, write it down, so I won't forget it. I won't forget what I wanted to say, although often reading it the next morning, it's not really what I want to say anymore, but just getting it off my chest. And then what I'll sometimes do at that point is meditate for a few minutes, 10 minutes or so, and then try to go back to sleep, and that often works for me. How often do you have insomnia? Okay, so it's not a major problem, but it would be nice to get rid of that as well. Well, hopefully going through these techniques on a regular basis, keeping the ones that seem to work for you, you'll be able to use them when you have insomnia as well. I think one of the things that we tend to do is lay in bed and keep doing whatever we are doing that is giving us insomnia. So it's usually thinking, and usually the best thing to do is to actually get up. Get up and read a boring book, do something to take your mind off of things. I will often listen to MP3s of relaxing audio. I know a lot of people who listen to books on tape to help them fall asleep. Yeah. yeah, what I try to do is rather than watch videos on YouTube, I will listen to them or have an MP3 of some of the audio um, because the light from the screen sometimes can actually keep you awake. So if you're actually looking at the screen, so if you are going to use a video, it's usually helpful if the screen is not facing towards you, if you close your eyes and you just listen. But that works for me. I do that a lot too. Yeah, and then again, writing down. Or sometimes I'll even record myself talking. I'm not a big fan of journaling. I believe it is tremendously helpful, and so I have tried many, many times to keep a journal. But I don't enjoy writing. I've never enjoyed writing. I have learned how to write correctly for school, but it's not something that makes me happy. So I have found that recording things is easier for me, and sometimes I will record with speech recognition, so that if I want a written copy of it later, I can go back and just correct any speech recognition errors, and then I have a written copy of what I recorded as well. Okay. Well, good. I'm glad we talked about that. We had never really discussed sleep issues in the past, so that's good. Are you ready to talk about a few more anxiety techniques? Okay. So the first couple of techniques we're going to talk about are logic-based techniques. So the first is the Socratic method. I don't know if you have studied Socrates much or read much Socrates, but it's about questioning. So what you want to do is ask yourself questions that will lead to the inconsistencies in your negative thoughts. So, for example, what's one of your negative thoughts? That you're a failure. Tell me more about that. Feel like you fail at everything you do. Okay, so the example would be when you say, I'm a failure at everything I do you mean that you fail at some things some of the time, or at all things all of the time? You feel like you fail at all things all of the time. Well, and then you would want to look at that and realize that that's not possible. It isn't true of anyone. No one fails at everything. We couldn't function in life if we failed in everything. You obviously succeed in going to work. You succeed in feeding yourself. You succeed in keeping yourself in an apartment. You succeed in your relationship. So, looking at that and realizing that you make some mistakes some of the time, and that's true of all humans. Again, you can't hold yourself to non-human standards. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes on a regular basis, and we're all embarrassed by them at certain points. Now, another thing we do when looking at our problems is we look at them as black and white. We are either always good or we're always bad. We fail at everything or we never fail at anything. And you want to make sure that you're being realistic when you're looking at whatever's causing you anxiety and evaluate them in shades of gray. We are never all one way or another way. If things don't work out as you hoped, you can think of the experience as a partial success or a learning opportunity. If you've made a bad decision, it's something that you can learn from. If you're unhappy in your job, you want to look at what you can learn from that situation and what you need to do to improve it. But rather than looking at things as, this is bad, this is good, what's the good in the bad situation? Okay? And you want to pinpoint your specific errors. So what are the mistakes that were made, instead of writing yourself off as a total failure? You, like we talked about earlier, you can't fail at everything, or you wouldn't be here today. You would be stuck in your home, unable to go anywhere. You know, there are lots of things that you do to function in this world, and you do them well. So you can't look at yourself as a failure and everything. Okay? Do those two techniques make sense? Do you think either would work for you? And again, sometimes you can pull in some of the other techniques. So what would you say to a friend? Because often you would ask these kind of questions to a friend if they're making unrealistic expectations about themselves. If that technique tends to work for you, then pull these in, you know, looking at the shades of gray when you're talking to yourself as if you were a friend. All right? Now, some other important techniques are about semantics, but the way we talk to ourselves in our thoughts. You know, all of our feelings they don't just occur from things that happen. Something happens, we have thoughts about it, which then causes our emotions about the situation. So, you know, if we drop our ice cream on the floor, our thought could be, I'm so clumsy, I drop everything, I really wanted that ice cream, now I can't have it, and then we're miserable. Our thought could be, I'd actually already had enough, my waistline could afford not to have the rest of that ice cream anyway, I'm glad the decision was made for me, and then you move on and you're content. So really the same situation, the situation does not cause your emotions. Your thoughts about the situation cause the emotions. And many of us talk to ourselves in our thoughts in a very negative manner. We use words to talk to ourselves that we would never use to anyone else. So one of the things you want to do is make sure that the language you use with yourself is not as emotionally loaded. So instead of thinking, I shouldn't have made that mistake, you can tell yourself, it would be preferable if I hadn't made that mistake. It would have been good if I hadn't made that mistake. Hopefully next time I won't make that mistake, instead of this very black and white thinking, which we talked about earlier, of I shouldn't. And it's very should or shouldn't is a very blaming word too. It doesn't give any leeway for mistakes. So when you hear yourself using this language of labeling yourself as I am always this way, so when you label yourself as inferior or a fool or a loser or something like that, think about what those labels mean. What's the definition of that term? And when you define the terms, there's really no such thing as a fool or a loser. Foolish behavior exists, and you know, other behaviors that don't work in our benefit exist, but no one is all one way. Nobody fits into one label cleanly. But we like to label ourselves sometimes. And so don't let yourself get away with that. When your negative self-talk starts telling you you are all one way or all another way, then fight against it. Again, be that good friend to yourself to say, of course you're not a fool. You've done this and this and this and this, which proves you're not a fool. And you're not a loser. Here are all the things you've accomplished in your life. Clearly, you're not a loser. Again, it's this very black and white thinking. So when you find yourself labeling or the kind of terms that you're using, really, really think about it. Have that conversation with yourself. Don't let yourself use those thoughts that make you feel inferior, cause that anxiety, make you feel like you're always one certain way. We are very changeable beings. Remember that pretty much every 7 years, almost all of the cells in our body have regenerated. So there's very little of our body that is the same as 7 years ago. So obviously, we can't be the same our whole life. We are changeable beings. We like to see ourselves as this core unit that doesn't change. But, and our memory distorts things. I think if we were to talk to ourselves from 10 years ago, we would be very surprised as to how different we were than we see ourselves in our memory. So you are changing. You are not always going to be one way. Your mistakes are not always going to feel as big as they do right now. Everything is changing in life. Okay? The other subnantic technique that we want to use is to be specific about your strengths and weaknesses. Again, instead of using judgments about what kind of person you are and whether that's good or bad, you want to think of yourself as having strengths and weaknesses. We all do. So clearly, because you make mistakes, it doesn't make you defective or worthless. You have some weaknesses that you can work on, but there are strengths that balance those out, and often our strengths are our weaknesses. So it's very hard to see them one way or the other. Using myself, for example, I am a very compassionate person. Of course, we would think of that as a strength, right? Compassion is a strength. It causes me great anxiety because I am constantly worrying about other people. I'm worrying about how other people feel. I'm worrying about how other people think about me. I'm worrying about all of these other things. Is this other person happy? Does this other person, I try to project onto other people how they will think and how they will feel. So although compassion is definitely my strength, and it's one of the reasons why I work in this field, it's also my weakness, because my strong sense of compassion for other people is what also causes me to have a lot of anxiety. Now, again, talking about that, I've overcome a lot of these things. I use all the tools and techniques that I talk to you about. So I am not as anxious as I used to be, and I really, especially as I get older, do not worry about what other people think about me as much. And I've lost a lot of the egocentricity of when I was in my 20s. And we think of egocentricity as somebody who only thinks about themselves. But the problem is when you're egocentric, you think everyone else thinks like you do. So for me, if I see someone else in a situation that would cause me anxiety or make me upset, I assume they feel the same way. And I have slowly started to learn that that is not true. I heard a quote once, or someone told me that we are all stars in our own movie. So that person over there who I may think feels just like me, they're a star of their own movie. I am a bit player in their movie, and they may have thoughts and feelings that are very different from mine, and I can't predict what those are. The more I study of the brain, the more I realize that our brain chemistries are all so different that there's no way we can all react to the same situations in the same way. We don't have the same makeup in our brains. And I, in some ways, can't understand yours. I can try, and I can have you explain things to me so that I can try to understand how your brain works. But again, brains are very different. So it is important to keep that in mind, and so I worry less about what other people think of me, because I've realized that I can't predict what other people are going to think of me. I may think I am being so wonderful to someone and I'm taking care of them, and they may think I'm a nag and I am, in their face all the time and I won't leave them alone. I can't predict that, and especially with little nuances in relationships. So I've slowly started to let that go. And when I need to know what somebody thinks, I ask them. And I try to get them to give me an honest answer. And I try not to predict anymore. So that was a little tangent about semantic techniques. So the techniques we really talked about today are the logic-based techniques. So making sure that you question yourself and you question your beliefs and you don't think in black and white, because life just doesn't work that way. There's no all good, there's no all bad in anybody at any time. Semantic techniques, so making sure that you don't let your self-talk be unrealistic and negative, and really change the words that you use in your thoughts, and making sure that you're specific with yourself about, if you are trying to label yourself as one way or another, think about the ways in which that's not the case. If you're trying to say you're always one way, think about your strengths in other ways, and realize that yes, you have weaknesses, but we all do. Okay? Well, good. I hope those are useful for you. I hope you can use them this week. All right. Well, I want to end with a little affirmation card. I bet you've picked one out when you first came in outside of the office. So I have that card, and I'm going to have you just close your eyes. Take a deep breath in and just listen to my voice. My life is a mirror. The people in my life are really mirrors of me. This affords me the opportunity to grow and change. My life is a mirror. The people in my life are really mirrors of me. This affords me the opportunity to grow and change. When you feel ready, you can open your eyes. And I look forward to seeing you next week.